Hi, my name is Ebon.
My name is Karima.
And I'm Kiara. Hi, everyone. Think about this question. Performance-enhancing drugs, general substance abuse, and domestic violence charges. Which of the above do you think receives the most suspensions from the NFL? The answer to that question is what sparked our research question, which reads as follows. On the next slide, what factors contribute to the severity of disciplinary actions towards NFL players from 2002 to 2014? On our next slide, we're going to delve into the importance. This research topic also stemmed from our reading and early analysis of a dataset and article written by Allison McCann called The NFL's Uneven History of Punishing Domestic Violence. Ultimately, we decided to continue pursuing this topic because of the lack of attention there was to it. The NFL generates billions of dollars in revenue, but when they fail to adequately punish their players accused of domestic violence, it sends a harmful message to their viewers and survivors of domestic violence alike. On this next slide, we talk about our sources. We used 4 datasets to conduct our research, but the main one we used is titled NFL Suspensions and can be found by simply installing the 538 package in R.
To start our research, we identified the factors that could potentially contribute to the severity of disciplinary actions towards NFL players. Those factors are as follows: change in time, a player's age at the time of their suspension, the team a player was on at the time of their suspension, a player's position on their team at the time of their suspension, the offense that caused the suspension, domestic violence versus PEDS. Through different visualization methods, we will explore these factors and come to conclusions that will help us answer our research question. Please note, to better explore our data, we replaced all indefinite game suspensions with the value of 32. Next slide. The levels of severity are as follows, with level 5 being the most severe. Next slide, okay. We use this graph to help look at trends over time. From observing it, it is clear that players in the NFL are given suspensions with a wide range of severity levels. It appears that suspensions of level 2 severity are the most popular type of suspensions given, while suspensions of level 1 and 5 severity were given most frequently after 2010. Suspensions of level 5 severity increased in frequency, and suspensions of level 1 severity decreased in frequency towards 2014. So we decided to conclude that the NFL has become slightly harsher in the ways that it disciplines its players. Next slide.
So what about age? Because when we look at age, it brings up the question of whether maturity plays a factor, and not just maturity, but the length of a player's career, which can influence their relationship with NFL personnel and can influence their suspensions. With that idea, one would assume that the most severe suspensions would be clustered around the lower range of ages. However, another way to perceive it is that repeated offenses carry higher punishments, and so therefore we would assume that severe suspensions would cluster around the higher end of the age range. However, the scatter plot is clear. The R value of a negative 0.05 is well below even the weak range of significant R values, and the coefficient of determination clearly shows that 0% of the variation in severity of suspensions can be explained by a player's age.
The next relationship we wanted to explore was between the specific NFL team and the total number of game suspensions. We decided to use box plots to really be able to visualize the distributions that existed. This graph has a lot of useful information, but there are 4 key takeaways. The first is that the median number of suspensions across all teams is 4, which was consistent with our previous findings. The next is that the Dallas Cowboys had the highest median game suspensions versus the Miami Dolphins, who had the lowest median game suspensions. The New York Giants and the Miami Dolphins both have relatively minimal total team suspensions. And lastly, the Green Bay Packers have the highest interquartile range of all the teams, which means that there was the largest variance in the data for that specific team.
Next, we decided to look at if a player's position as suspension had an effect on how severe they were disciplined. We found that wide receivers have the most suspensions of any positions. They even tie with safety for the most suspensions of level 5 severity. After that, it appears to be cornerback and running backs. Next slide. We also looked at the average game suspensions of individual offenses. DUI manslaughter has the highest average game suspension of all offenses, while the offenses with the lowest average game suspensions are disorderly conduct, accused of battery, and resisting result. Next slide. The average game suspension for domestic violence appears to fall above most other offenses, including performance enhancing drugs. These findings contradict claims made by Alison McCann in her article, The NFL's Uneven History of Punishing Domestic Violence, where she states the NFL's punishment of personal conduct violations has been inconsistent and, on average, less harsh than its punishment of drug offenses. We have concluded that the difference in these findings may be due to the ways we store data. McCann grouped multiple offenses under personal conduct violations, while we ungrouped them and allowed them to stand alone as individual offenses. The scope of time used in her research and ours differ as well. Ultimately, the differences in our findings could be due to the large outlier present in the data for domestic violence.
After using Alison McCann's findings, we decided to look into PEDs and domestic violence further. We made a histogram to look into the frequency distribution of game suspensions for the reasons listed before. We concluded that game suspensions for PEDs are more frequent and severe than for domestic violence. In addition, the most common amount of game suspensions for performance-enhancing drugs are 3 to 4, while for domestic violence, they're only between 1 to 3.
So now looking back at all the factors we looked at, age, team, position, time, and offense, we conclude that age and team aren't really truly factors. However, with position, we see that wide receivers by far get suspended the most and most severely. So we must then ask what factors with the culture of wide receivers and or how they're perceived in the league contributes to their higher propensity to commit offenses or be more severely punished. Finally, with time and offense, we find that the level of severity has increased over time, especially with the penalization of drug usage that has gotten harsher, not only in the NFL, but as our culture as a nation, versus domestic violence, which is underpunished compared to drug usage. And so that begs the question, with the NFL and American football being the #1 sport in our country, why is it that we critique drug use more than violence against women? And how can institutions like the NFL take a lead in changing this narrative? Thank you, and any questions?